Hello everyone, it's your favorite down in space here, and it's not a secret to many people that know me that I don't consider most games that try to be political in any fashion to be terribly good at it. Even at the best of times, there are very few games I consider to be good at it, especially if you want to actually discuss politics rather than just have a game saying, this idea is bad, which is a perfectly valid kind of game or story to make. I'm not saying it's wrong, but overall, it's very hard to make a truly political game, in my opinion, interesting or good or thought-provoking. And there are exceptions, but very difficult ones, in my opinion, to do. One of them I firmly believe is going to be one of these cases is Relooted, a game that has been announced relatively recently, but the entire premise/core concept kind of has a major design flaw that ultimately undermines the entire point of what supposedly the game is trying to be. And we're going to get into that today of what is the core problem with the game Relooted. Now, while I will link below the video for Relooted, as I do not want to sound like I'm just making stuff up here, I want to give a brief overview just to establish what specifically I'm talking about as the issue before I go into it. Because the core concept of Relooted is you play a group of characters who are trying to steal back African artifacts from Western museums and bring them back to Africa. That is the entire core premise. I'm not entirely... I think it's supposed to be a puzzle platformer kind of game, but I wasn't entirely clear by looking at the gameplay. But I could just be stupid and not understanding it based on the video stuff. Well, I'm prone to do that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the gameplay specifically here. I'm talking about the premise. The premise of re-stealing artifacts to bring them back to their rightful people. Now, this is already a contentious topic among some people, and by my own admission, I do not particularly care about that issue in of itself in any real particular capacity. Like, I just do not care. But ultimately, this is not about whether you view that idea as important or not, but rather about a specific detail about it. Specifically, where the characters are based. This may sound like a weird thing to nitpick, but it gets home into the issue. Specifically, these characters are based in South Africa. Now, you might think, why on earth does that matter, Will? Why does being based in South Africa matter? It's on Africa, isn't it? And you are right. But now, granted, there are a lot of artifacts that are supposed to be in the game, all based on, or are real artifacts, and I think there's like 40 or 70 something artifacts in total. I don't remember off the top of my head. But the point is, there's a lot of them, right? And we don't know all of them. And I was curious, were they all going to be actually artifacts from South Africa? Because if they aren't all from South Africa, then an issue crops up. Now, I was going to try to look at the artifacts we could see in the gameplay and promotional material, and then reverse image, like try to find out where they were, but I didn't do any of that. Because we actually do see two of the artifacts, and specifically where they're from. And neither of the two shown, like we get like a little map and some of the preview images showing where this artifact is originally from. And the two we get shown on the maps are from East Africa, a little bit below Ethiopia, I believe, and in West Africa. You may notice, with even the basic understanding of geography and terminology, that neither of those are in South Africa. And I must be clear to you, these characters are not stealing these artifacts and then bringing them back to those locations and they just happen to be based in South Africa. They are taking them from those foreign places, bringing them to South Africa and just keeping them there. You might be able to start seeing the issue here, but let's dive a little more into it. Now you might say, well, what's the problem here? What's off about this whole premise? Well, fundamentally, it's about the underlying ethics and political implications of the game. Is that the game is built around the political and ethical idea that someone else should not own someone else's ancestors' culture. More specifically, if someone else some foreign group should not own someone's ancestors' relics. They should belong to the people or their descendants. And one can debate the ethics of this all you want. It doesn't really matter whether you agree or disagree with it, but that's the conceit of the game. That is the core premise the entire game and the morality of the characters work off of. That is the political message the game wants to send to its audience. However, this gets undermined when the characters just take the artifacts and then F off to South Africa. Because despite being in South Africa, that doesn't really change anything for most of the artifacts involved. As fundamentally, just because it's in a place in Africa doesn't mean they're anything close to being connected to the people who actually had those artifacts. Now, there are some continents that have a bit more unity, like Europe and Asia has some more unity with internally themselves a little bit, but Africa is not at all like that. Africa is a very big, the second biggest continent, a very diverse, both linguistically, ethnically, religiously. Like, Africa is a huge place, with the concept of unity with Africans being a basically non-existent one. There is barely anything you could say that unites all Africans. And that's not an insult or a good or a bad thing. It's just the fact that Africa is an extremely diverse continent with extremely diverse people. So fundamentally saying that, oh, because they're Africans, it's okay, we're stealing it back, is fundamentally changes nothing. Like, people in West Africa and East Africa, like we see two of the archives from, have basically nothing in common with South Africans, whether as a nation or as the people there. They're fundamentally just very different. It would be like, imagine if South America, or a nation in South America, stole some artifacts from Europe, right? Some European artifacts. And then you had, like, some British artifacts, right? And then a group in Russia stole them in the name of bringing them back to their rightful people, and then just kept them in Russia. No one would say that they got that back. No one would say that it was right. But because Africans, it's different? No, that's stupid and borders on racism. But isn't that exactly what the game is saying? The game is saying literally that, that we're stealing it because we're all Africans, even though, once again, Africa is not a unit group. They are not the same people. There's not like some magical group. Like, it's literally just effectively another form of racism and bigotry almost, but in a reverse kind of way, where instead of like, it's literally the same thing that the racist Europeans used to do, where they used to imagine all Africans were like these primitive slave tribes and Stone Age freaks, which is not true. It never was true. But that's kind of what the game is doing again, imagining all Africans as one group, that if you do one thing for one of them, it works for all of them. But it doesn't. You take, like, if you really cared about some artifacts or material in, like, if you were in West Africa or East Africa, you're not going to sleep better at night or be more happy knowing that your artifacts you care about is in the hands of someone on the other end of your continent, rather than, someone an equal distance away, just on an arbitrarily different continent. Like, seriously, the distance would be about the same in some cases. So fundamentally, the entire premise, the ethical consideration of the game of bringing the artifacts back to their rightful people is completely moot, because the characters aren't doing that. They're just stealing the artifacts from somebody else, and they're keeping it for themselves. They are, in essence, no better than the people they're taking it from. So we're left with a situation where the game is effectively, like, what is the message the game wants to send? Now, if I'm being charitable, what I believe has happened here is just the developers just didn't think about it, which at best probably just means they have a very odd view of Africans in general, which is kind of not great, but whatever. But at worst, it's just blatant, like, imagining all Africans as one group when they aren't, and blatantly ignoring the actual diversity and cultural differences of Africa, because you just imagine them as one group that all agree on everything, which is not true anywhere. No continent is like that anywhere. But overall, that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below and such. I'm sure I'll get some flack for this video, but I'm used to it. Overall, if you like this video down below, please like, comment, subscribe. If you didn't like it, then dislike and tell me why I suck, and I will see you all next time.